Number 1. Clark County John Doe. On August 21, 2006, a man checked into the now defunct Todd Motor Motel in Las Vegas. There is little to no record of what he did during the following 19 days. However, when he didn't check out as scheduled on September 11th, the motel manager entered the room and found the man lying unresponsive on the bed, holding a firearm. It appeared that he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to his head. He was estimated to be between 25 to 55 years old, was about 6 feet tall and weighed close to 200 pounds. His hair was brown and his eyes were blue. Fingerprints, DNA and dentals are available, though none of the information matched known missing persons. All of the records found gave no details of the belongings, except for a letter, the gun, and the clothes he was wearing. Investigators thought they had a lead, his name, but that turned out to be a dead end. The name he had given and was using belonged to another person, still living in California. The letter in his possession also seemed to be a lead that went dry. It was written to his sister, Birgit, and referenced an ex-wife named Karen, who lives in Perth, Australia, and possibly a daughter named Amy. But the letter was incomplete and didn't give last names or detailed address information. No family was ever located, and no one has claimed him despite having a clear photo. Interestingly, the ID the man had been using had been stolen in 2004 or 2005 and had been used by him for several jobs. An employer verified that the man had a strong German accent. The letter police found was gleaned from a computer in his possession. Additionally, the man mentioned in his letter a childhood friend named Dirk Mathles. Investigators found someone in the US matching that name, but he said he did not recognize the descendant. The man still remains unidentified. Number 2. Brittany Drexel. Brittany resided in Rochester, New York. She was a junior at Gates Chili High School, where she was a star player on the soccer team. Her parents are legally separated, and Brittany lived with her mother, but saw her father frequently. In April 2009, Brittany asked her mother's permission to travel to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, for spring break with her friends and longtime boyfriend. Her mother said no. They argued about it, and Brittany got permission to go to a friend's house. She went to Myrtle Beach in spite of what her mother said. Her mother was unaware of this. She thought Brittany was staying with her friend locally. They spoke several times on the phone after she arrived in South Carolina. Brittany's mother didn't find out where her daughter really was until she was notified that Brittany had disappeared. Brittany's friends last saw her at Bar Harbor Hotel in Myrtle Beach at 8 p.m. on April 25, 2009. Brittany walked more than a mile to the Blue Water Resort in Ocean Boulevard, where other friends were staying. Surveillance cameras there show her going into the resort, then leaving sometime after 8:30 p.m. At 9:15 p.m., she sent a text message to one of her friends saying she was going to see a friend who was staying at another hotel. She was never heard from again. She left all her clothes behind at her hotel room. Her beige purse and pink cellular phone disappeared with her. The phone's last signal was near US 17 and the Charleston County line, the night Brittany went missing. Since then, its battery has died. Peter Brozovitz is a person of interest in Brittany's disappearance. He was one of her New York friends and is the last person known to have seen her. He checked out of his hotel at 1 a.m., a few hours after he saw Brittany, and drove back to New York. He maintains his innocence in her disappearance. There were rumors of imminent breakthrough in Brittany's case in April 2010. Authorities announced they had 3 or 4 persons of interest, all of them from Myrtle Beach area, and they had obtained search warrants and given polygraph exams to these individuals. However, no arrests were made, and none of the persons of interest were publicly named. In 2016, a prison inmate claimed he was present when Brittany was killed. Taquan Brown told investigators he went to a stash house in the McLennanville area in the days after Drexel was abducted. As he entered the house with a couple of other men, he saw Timothy Dashawn Taylor sexually abusing Brittany Drexel. Later, she was shot and her body was placed in a pit or a gator pit to have her body disposed of, eaten by gators. Investigators have searched several alligator ponds but of no avail, and with no body, the case remains officially unsolved. Number 3. Rose Burkert and Roger Atkinson. On September 12, 1980, Rose Burkert and Roger Atkinson attempted to check into the Amanda Holiday Inn near Williamsburg, Iowa. At first, they were told there were no vacancies due to the Morticians Convention in town, but luckily there had been a cancellation. The couple received a key to room 260 at 7:40 p.m. Shortly after noon the next day, a housekeeper arrived at room 260 and knocked several times. She got no answer. She tried the door but found it locked. The housekeeper went to get a pass key from the hotel manager and returned to the room. She opened the door and first saw feet. Thinking they were asleep, she peered in further and discovered a grisly sight. Blood was splattered on the walls, the carpet, and across the bed's headboard. The couple was lying face down on the bed with their skulls beaten in, most likely by an axe or a hatchet. Their hands and fingers also showed defensive wounds, as if they had tried to protect their heads from the blows. In each case, the cause of death was determined to be acute blood loss and brain injuries. The room showed no signs of forced entry. 2 chairs sat next to the bed, indicating the killer or killers may have carried on a conversation with the couple prior to the slaying. Evidence also indicated the killer had at one point put his feet on the desk. He carved a piece of soap and written one word on the bathroom mirror: "This." The television had never been turned off. Over 400 people were interviewed about the murders, including hotel employees and close friends of the deceased. Rose had taken out a personal protection order on an ex-boyfriend, who she believed wanted to harm her. After they broke up, being a single mom, she got a dog. She returned home one day to find the dog killed and hanged in her front yard. However, after the murders, their ex-boyfriend passed a polygraph test and his alibi checked out. Another suspect was Atkinson's uncle Charles Hatcher, a serial killer who had recently escaped from Nebraska Mental Health Center. Hatcher was apprehended again under the alias Richard Clark in Lincoln, Nebraska, after trying to assault and sodomize a 17-year-old boy. However, even though Lincoln is only 4-hour drive from Williamsburg, it doesn't appear Hatcher was even questioned about the crimes. 35 years later, the murder of the young couple remains unsolved. Number 4. Jennifer Fergate. On May 31, 1995, at 10:44 p.m., a woman named Jennifer Fergate checked into room 2805 at the Oslo Plaza Hotel in Norway. Her order also included another person named Lois Fergate. For unknown reasons, she was not asked to provide any form of identification at the time. The receptionist present recalls a vague memory of her being alone at the time of her check-in. However, another receptionist is certain that she observed Jennifer standing in the reception area accompanied by a man between the age of 35 and 40 sometime during her stay. He has not been observed nor identified since. According to the members of the staff, Jennifer spoke English when making her initial booking. On May 31, when calling to say she would arrive later that day and be accompanied by another person, she spoke German, presumably without an accent. On her check-in form, she claimed to live on a street called Rue de l'Estede in the village of Verlaine, Belgium. However, no such street exists, nor is the area code she wrote down the correct one. There were also no companies in Belgium named Service, her stated employer at the time. Based on registrations from her keycard and eyewitnesses' accounts from the housekeepers, it's certain that she was not present in her room between 12:34 a.m. on June 1st and 8:50 a.m. on June 2nd. On June 2nd, she extended her stay until the following Sunday. At 8:06 p.m., she orders room service. The food is delivered at 8:23 p.m. This is the last time Jennifer is seen alive. Between Thursday and Saturday, 3 attempts are made to get in touch with her via the room's television, asking her to come down to the reception because of the missing payments. The last message was sent at 7:36 p.m. on June 3rd, which someone in the room confirmed to have read. After being informed that there had been a "Do Not Disturb" sign on her door for 2 days, the hotel supervisor called security to go check on her room. At about 7:50 p.m. that day, Aspen Ness, the hotel security, knocks on the door. Seconds later, he hears a gunshot from inside the room. Believing that 2 people are staying there, he walks back down to the reception, notifies his manager and calls the police. At this point, the room is left unattended. At 8:04 p.m., the security manager walks upstairs, decides to open the door ever so slightly, and spots a woman lying on the bed inside the dark room. After getting no response and noticing a sour smell, he decides to wait outside for the police to arrive, which happens half an hour later. The police find Jennifer lying dead in her bed, with a single gunshot wound to the forehead, and a 9mm Browning pistol in her right hand. Despite there being blood splatter all the way to the ceiling, no blood was found on her hand. Jennifer fired 2 shots. The first of them, a test shot as police described it, was fired through a pillow into the mattress. Perhaps the woman used the pillow as a silencer when testing the weapon. The second bullet went into her forehead and continued through the brain and out the back of her head. It then passed through the bed linens and mattress and ended up on the concrete floor under the bed. The gun in question, a 1999mm Browning produced in Herstal, Belgium, only had a partial serial number on it. In the chamber of the pistol, the next bullet automatically moved up and into place, ready for firing, and 7 more rounds waited in the magazine. In a black attaché case next to the bed were another 25 cartridges. Jennifer had brought 34 live rounds in all. The black briefcase contained absolutely nothing but cartridges. The police found nothing at the scene to suggest who the mysterious woman might be, nor that anyone besides her had stayed there. It seemed an obvious suicide, but quickly it became a nightmare for investigators. Fake name, clothing labels removed, and nothing at all in the room to indicate the young woman's identity. No passport, no wallet, no money, no credit card, no handbag, driver's license or keys, not even toiletries or makeup. Just a cologne bottle that was almost empty, and all the fingerprints on it belonged to the victim. The coroner determined that she was about 30 years old, not 21 as she claimed to be when checking in. Based on the content in her stomach, the coroner determined she must have eaten her food on the same day she was found dead, which happened almost 24 hours after she ordered it. Both the housekeepers and room service observed a single duvet on her bed. At the time of her death, 2 duvets were present on it. The investigators failed to retrieve any hairs or fluid from the bed. Room service also claims to have seen a trolley case in her room, which led her to believe Jennifer was a flight attendant. No such trolley was found afterwards. One housekeeper mentioned seeing a particularly nice pair of shoes in her closet when cleaning the room on Thursday morning. After Jennifer's death, the only pair of shoes found in her room was the one she was wearing, and the housekeeper was certain that it wasn't the same ones she had seen earlier. Jennifer attempted to make 2 phone calls during her stay. Neither of the 2 numbers were valid. Based on the numbers similar to the ones she called, it's been suggested that she tried to call someone in Grace Halone or Sarayang, both neighboring municipalities of Verlaine. Amongst the items on her desk was a plastic newspaper bag containing an edition of USA Today. The bag was addressed to room 2816, located on the opposite end of the hallway from 2805. The investigators also found a fingerprint on the bag, which they were unable to identify at the time. One of the guests claimed to have been woken up at night by loud banging noise coming from one of the nearby rooms. She also told the police about a foreign couple that had piqued her interest. Numerous theories about Jennifer were being considered by the investigators at the time, including her being part of a failed drug operation, working for secret intelligence agency, being a high-class escort, or even the missing wife of Italian mobster Leoluca Bagarella. The police recently opened her grave. hoping to find out where she came from or even who she might be. The results are currently pending. Number 5. On January 2, 1935, a man checked into room 1046 of the Hotel President in Kansas City, Missouri. He signed the register as Roland T. Owen. He showed up with no luggage. When a maid came to clean the room later that day, she found Owen sitting with the shades drawn tight and only one small lamp switched on. He told her to leave the door unlocked because he was expecting a friend, but left the room before the woman finished cleaning. She later said that he seemed nervous and frightened. At 10:30 a.m. on January 3rd, the same maid returned to clean the room. She found the door locked from the outside and opened it with her passkey, assuming that Owen had gone out. Instead, she found him sitting alone in the dark. Later that night, a motorist named Robert Lane picked up a stranger several blocks from the Hotel President. Though it was a cold evening, the man was dressed only in pants and an undershirt, and had a deep scratch in his left arm. When Lane told his passenger that he looked as if he was having a bad night, the man replied, "I'll kill that tomorrow." Lane would later identify the hitchhiker as none other than Roland T. Owen. 7 a.m. on January 4th, the operator at the Hotel President noticed that the phone in the room 1046 was off the hook. The same bellboy who had checked Owen into the hotel was sent up to tell the occupant of room 1046 to hang up the phone. When he got there, he found the door locked, with a "Don't Disturb" sign hanging from the knob. He knocked and was told to come in, though the door was locked. A different bellboy went up later that afternoon. He let himself into the room with a passkey and found Owen lying on the bed in the dark, naked and seemingly inebriated. He also found that the phone stand had been knocked over. Without turning on any lights or conversing with Owen, the bellboy righted the phone stand, replaced the receiver in its cradle, and then exited the room. A couple of hours later, the operator noticed that the phone was off the hook once more. This time she sent the first bellboy back up to check it out. He opened the door with his passkey. When the bellboy went inside, he discovered that blood was all over the room, and the nude body of Owen was on the floor. He had been restrained with some cord and beaten across the right side of his head, fracturing his skull. Roland had also been stabbed repeatedly in the chest, and bruises on his neck suggested he was strangled. In spite of this, he was still conscious, and when asked who did this to him, Owen replied, "Nobody. I fell against the bathtub." Roland slipped into a coma while being transported to the hospital and died later that night. It is estimated that he was tortured approximately 6 or 7 hours before he was found. Now this is where everything starts to get a lot more weird. It turned out that Roland T. Owen was not the young man's real name, and there was a plethora of weird stuff surrounding his death. When Owen's nude body was found, all of his clothing and personal possessions were missing from the room. Several other hotel's items, including towels, soap and shampoo, had also been removed. Since Owen couldn't be identified, his body was put on public display on funeral home with the hopes that someone might recognize him. While several people did recognize Owen from various encounters with him, none of them actually knew his true identity. Plans were made to bury Owen's body in an unmarked grave at Potter's Field. However, before Owen could be brought to city's Potter's Field, the head of the funeral home in charge of the body received an anonymous phone call. The man asked the burial to be delayed until money could be sent to cover the cost of a decent interment. The caller claimed that Roland T. Owen was the dead man's real name, and that Owen had been engaged to the caller's sister. The funeral director said that the mysterious benefactor told him that Owen just got into a jam. He added that the police are on the wrong track. Shortly afterward, the cash arrived via special delivery mail anonymously, and Owen was finally buried in Memorial Park Cemetery. No one attended the funeral other than a handful of detectives. More money was sent with equal mysteriousness to a local florist to pay for a bouquet of roses for the grave. It was accompanied by a card to be placed with the flowers. It read, "Love forever, Louise." The cops staked out the funeral in case the anonymous benefactor made an appearance. But of course, nobody ever did. It wasn't until a year and a half later that a woman from Birmingham, Alabama saw a photo of Owen in the paper and immediately identified him as her long-lost brother, Artemus Ogletree. Ogletree's family had not seen him since he left home, a year before he supposedly died. However, they later received 3 typewritten letters from him, dated after his death. Now, his family hadn't learned about his demise yet, but they found the letters suspicious all the same, because Artemus didn't know how to type. Finally, Mrs. Ogletree got a phone call from a man calling himself Jordan, who told her that Artemus had gotten married to a wealthy woman in Egypt, and that was the last she heard about her son, until she discovered he had been long dead in a hotel room in Kansas City. When Mrs. Ogletree was shown a photo of Owen, she immediately recognized the dead man as her missing son. The dead man had finally been identified. However, justice for his brutal death remained hopelessly elusive. The case has remained cold ever since, except for one strange incident about 10 years ago. In the early 2000s, around 70 years after the murder, Dr. John Horner, a librarian at the Kansas City Public Library, received an anonymous out-of-state call. The caller claimed they were going through the belongings of a person who recently died and found a bunch of newspaper clippings about the mystery of room 1046 in a box. They also said they found something in the box which was mentioned in one of the articles, but hung up before saying what this something was. At this point, the truth of what happened in room 1046 will likely remain a mystery.